Philip contacted me a few months ago about downsizing his chambers, and sad as that might have been, it actually represented such a wonderful opportunity for us to take ownership of these law reports. Robert Menzies is, I think, Melbourne University's most famous alumni. He was a student here from 1913 to 18, and he finished his law degree in 1916. He was, of course, the Supreme Court prize winner. He won the very distinguished Bowen Prize for his essay, Rule of Law in a Time of War, which critiqued the use of laws to deprive people of their liberties during the First World War. And he went on, of course, to have a glittering career at the bar. And he said that politics proved to be my greatest duty, but the law remained my first love. And he was a regular junior to Sir Owen Dixon, who would go on to be a judge on the High Court. Robert Menzies became the youngest KC in Victoria at the age of just 35, and I'm assured by Philip that is still very young. At the same time, the same year in New South Wales, Menzies' long-time, I think really lifelong rival, Doc Evatt, HV Evatt, became a KC too. So their rivalry really never stopped, and they came up against each other in many cases, and of course politically in 3 elections with Doc Evatt, leader of the Labor Party. Doc Evatt does win a battle against Menzies in the Communist Party ban, but of course he loses the war and never ever gets to be Prime Minister. And there's a wonderful book you can read that we have for sale on Menzies versus Evatt that really details this great rivalry. We have on display here 4 cases, and I'm sure Philip can speak to them in more detail than I can, but of course the engineers case, which Menzies is sole counsel for the successful party at the age of just 25, and really makes his name as a leading barrister. We have the Kish affair. For those of you who followed I'm going to get this wrong, Zach, 1938, wasn't it? 34, thank you. There you go. That's why you're here. 1934 Australian politics. Egon Kish was a Czech communist who was brought out by Communist Party supporters here in Australia to give a speech about how great their movement was, and Robert Menzies was Attorney General at the time, and we had this rather kind of I guess unfair immigration restriction called the dictation test. And Robert Menzies had heard that Egon Kish was an amazing linguist. He knew all manner of European languages. And so, what language was Menzies going to pull out as Attorney General to test Egon Kish on when he tried to come to Australia? And you could, if you failed the dictation test, you were prevented from coming to Australia. Anyway, so he said it's Scottish Gaelic. He won't know Scottish Gaelic. Well, unfortunately for Menzies, the lawyers for Egon Kish went to the High Court and said, well, Scottish Gaelic, it's not a European language, and this test requires the dictation to be in a European language, and the High Court agreed. And the poor Scots in Australia were absolutely devastated that their Scottish Gaelic was not considered a spoken European language, and you can read all about the judgment here in one of these law reports. The other 2 we have on display are the bank nationalisation case and the Communist Party dissolution case. Bank nationalisation is the major issue at the 49 election. The Prime Minister in the lead-up, Ben Chifley, Labor Prime Minister, wants to nationalise the banks. Menzies uses this issue as a key campaign issue in that 49 election, and of course, as leader of a relatively new Liberal Party, becomes the first ever Liberal Prime Minister of Australia, arguably on the back of that issue. The final case, as I said, was the Communist Party dissolution case. This is where Sir Owen Dixon and Menzies part company, sadly. I mean, not lifelong company, just temporarily. Menzies tries to ban the Communist Party of Australia, and the High Court says, no, you can't ban it. Owen Dixon is on the court at the time, and says it's unconstitutional. So Menzies says, well, I'm just going to go and change the constitution, and the Australian public just vote no to changing the constitution, and the rest, as they say, is history. So you get a bit of a flavour of how Menzies interacted with the High Court, how important the law was to Robert Menzies, and how important these law reports are to our history. A final comment on these law reports is that there are a couple of name stamps in them in addition to Robert Menzies' name. Philip Crutchfield, of course, is one of the name stamps, but Brian Shaw is the other. Now, Brian Shaw, some of you may know very well who Brian Shaw is, but for those who don't, he was a very famous barrister here in Victoria, but he's also Robert Menzies' nephew by marriage. Menzies' wife, Dame Patty, was originally a Lecky, and Brian's mother, Gwen, and thank you to Ian Lecky, who's here today. Lovely to have you. You very kindly presented me with an extract of the Lecky family tree here. Brian's mother, Gwen, was Dame Patty's younger sister, and in the lead up to the 1949 election, Dame Patty and Robert Menzies sold their house at Howard Street Q to Gwen and her husband, Joss, and their son and their other two children lived in that house with them. And we believe, I did speak to Robert Menzies' daughter, Heather Henderson, about this last year. We believe that Menzies may have left these CLRs in the house, and Brian, as a brilliant student and then someone who went on to law school here, and there's even a scholarship named in Brian's honour here at Melbourne Law School, that he would have received the law reports from his uncle, who would have kept them in the house. That's our guess. Not hard evidence, but that's our guess. But wonderful to have you all here, and wonderful again to have the generosity of Philip Crutchfield to the Robert Menzies Institute and help us honour this really important part of our history. So, Philip, I'd love you to share a few thoughts and say a few words. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Georgina, and thanks everyone for coming along. And in case I forget, the Robert Menzies Institute, in my opinion, is such an important part of this university. We're having the James Merrill's Fellowship Lecture on Thursday night, which is a sold-out event, and the topic is cancel culture. And as much as Sue will be an engaging speaker, I'm confident it's the topic as much as the speaker that's led to a sellout. It's undoubtedly the case that diversity of views in a university is not what it was when I was there, let alone when my parents were at this university. And it's a critical part of a university that we have this institute, and it's fitting that it's in the most beautiful part of the faculty. And to show you how old I am, this was the law school when I was here. This is where I went to law school in the quadrangle. I'll say something brief about how I came across these, but before I do, just on the university, Melbourne University is dear to my heart. Both of my parents went to this university. Both of my wives, you meant to laugh, don't cancel me, and all four of my children so far, and I've got a year 12 and a year 11. The year 11 might be a bit of a long shot at the moment, but the year 12 looks like she's got it in the bag, so it'd be nice to get all six through Melbourne University. And it's I read a book about the Scottish Enlightenment, and when I picked it up I thought it must have been an English oxymoronic joke, the Scottish Enlightenment. But it was something in there about a chap called John Witherspoon, who started Princeton University, and when he did so, he was obviously a Presbyterian, Scottish Presbyterian, and he made the faculty, made the students read books that Witherspoon actually disagreed with. And gee, I wish we were able to be like that at a university these days, particularly in some departments, and I don't mean the law school. So I came across these books because my wife is sort of distantly related to Sir John Latham. She's a great niece or something. And I had a friend who had Latham's CLRs, and I was trying to secure them and I couldn't get them. And then I discovered that Brian Shaw had had Menzies reports. And so when Shaw was leaving the bar, he advertised, and I rang up straight away and asked, I said I'd buy the books. I also bought his New South Wales Law Reports. As Georgina says, it's not, my generosity is not unlimited. It's as much to do with the fact I am downsizing and had nowhere for these books. And I wanted to give them to the law school or to the Supreme Court library, and I think it was Michelle Foster who said, well, what about the Institute? And that's how they found their way here. The Commonwealth Law Reports it's fitting that they end up at this university because, of course, the editor for the longest period of time was an associate of Owen Dixon, James Merrills, and there's a fellowship in Merrills' name and the affection that Merrills is regarded. If you look in the start of a volume of the Commonwealth Law Reports, there's a list of all the people who were the Commonwealth Law Reports reporters, of which I'm proud to say I was one, and Merrills taught us to make every word count. I said I was going to retire from being a Commonwealth, so what you had to do, you got all the argument from the transcript of the argument, together with the written submissions, together with the judgment, and you, that is me, I had to distill that into a head note that then goes back to Merrills and then goes to the judges for the editor to have a debate with the judges. And that's why the Commonwealth Law Reports are so special, because they're the only ones that the judges sign off on the head note. So the head note actually is not just someone's opinion, it's what the court thought they were deciding. And I said to a friend of mine, James Elliott, who'd done it before me, I'm going to finish doing this when I don't get any black amendments or emendations from Merrills. He said, that will never happen. I did it for 9 years, and it was an exhausting task. I'm telling you, you got to $75 a report or something. But all of us who did that, we set up this fellowship in Merrills' name, and that was all the Commonwealth Law Reports reporters. So that happened because of these reports. And of course, Dixon was a Melburnian, Merrills was a Melburnian, and some of these cases, of course, were decided in the High Court when it was in Little Bourke Street. So I'm thrilled and honoured that these books have found a home. And my friends tease me because apparently on Instagram, if you go on it, on one of them it's got a stamp, it's got Menzies' name, and it's got my name. And one of my friends teased me and said, "Two great Australians," which might have been out of place there. So I was thrilled, to get these from Brian. And Brian Shaw was a highly respected member of our bar and good friends with one of our partners, Michael Clough, lived next door to Michael Clough. So thank you for coming along today.